The Commonwealth has accused Karen Read of striking her boyfriend, Boston police officer John O'Keefe, with her car after a night of drinking and leaving him in the snow to die. The defense is saying, as they said in their opening statement, that Karen Read was framed and this is all a cover-up. So the court morning recess is 45 minutes this morning because the judge said that there were things that the lawyers and the court needed to take up. Those are being taken up in a sidebar outside the presence of, well, at least the internet audience. After the court started a bit late this morning because they were dealing with court matters. And then we were dealing with the rulings from the Commonwealth's motion to exclude witnesses. The judge is allowing in all of the witnesses that voir dired. The judge is limiting the testimony of the doctor as to what the injuries on John O'Keefe's arm are consistent with, but not what they are inconsistent with. So no testimony regarding vehicle collisions and things like that. The court also had questions about the second accident reconstruction biomechanical engineer's testimony, saying that they can't give an opinion about injuries because that opinion has to be given by medical professionals. I think that the way biomechanical engineers testify, we might still see information about the mechanisms of injury because that's literally their entire job. So just not whether those injuries are what caused death. The court is going to reserve ruling on that and narrowing or not that testimony until next week because we will be in the defense's case next week. Is there still a possibility that this goes to the jury next week? I don't know if that's possible, but we will see what happens. Then we got back into witness 66, the data expert for the Commonwealth. This is the state trooper that did the phone extractions and went through them. We heard the voicemails that Karen Read left with John O'Keefe, where she is clearly pissed at John O'Keefe. All of those voicemails are left after 12:35 a.m. Her Wi-Fi automatically reconnects to John O'Keefe's home Wi-Fi at 12:36 a.m. What we learned from John O'Keefe's phone GPS data is they are at 34 Fairview at 12:24 a.m. and his phone at 12:25 a.m. stops moving in between 32 and 34 Fairview and does not move until 6:30 something the next morning. So from 12:24 to 12:25, in that minute, the phone stops moving. The voicemails that we heard previously was the voicemail where Karen Read's phone seems to be on an open line inside Carrie Roberts' car. And that open line picks up the 911 call made by Jen McCabe and those wiper blades that are thumping in the background whilst Karen Read is really just wailing in distress in the background through the closed car and in the blizzard. You can hear her distinctly yelling the names of both Carrie and Jen and more. The other voicemails, she is clearly pissed at John. At one point says, "I'm here with your fucking niece and nephew. You're fucking some girl. You're a fucking pervert." And that insult repeats in a few of the voicemails. She is clearly pissed, wondering where he is and thinking that he is cheating on her and accusing him of such, until the voicemail in the early morning hours after 4 a.m., where it is very rushed and it sounds panicked with a "John, where are you?" So there's a shift in those voicemails, but we also know there are 53 missed calls in that period of time. And that is after she has texted him, "I'm going home, I'm leaving, your niece and nephew are alone," and he doesn't respond. If this testimony had come in earlier, we would have had more context for why Karen Read at 4 a.m. has gone like 0 to 60 with stress, because if we knew what the text messages were that she's telling him, "I'm going back to my house, I'm leaving your niece and nephew alone," and he did not respond to her, now we have a foundation for the behavior. We have a little bit more context and understanding that this fight had spilled over overnight and he just wasn't responding at all. So at the lunch break, we are still talking to the Commonwealth's cell phone expert from Massachusetts State Police. We have finished with cross-examination. We are in the middle of redirect. And Yannetti, in a surprise move in cross-examination, started asking about Karen Read's Google searches. Here's why that was so surprising, because right when we came back from the extended break at the morning, we heard brief argument on a Google search that the Commonwealth wanted to put into evidence. And they stated that Karen Read made a Google search at 1:27 p.m. on January 29th. And that Google search was for, quote, DUI attorney, end quote. If there is attorneys on that, I might be wrong. This is from memory after a interesting long morning. But what David Yannetti brought up when he argued this is that at 1:19 p.m., Trooper Proctor called Karen Read. So it seems that Trooper Proctor called Karen Read, and then Karen Read started Googling DUI attorneys. What impression does that leave you with of what Karen Read thought she might be in trouble for is up to you and this jury to decide. But the defense successfully kept that out during the prosecution's case in chief, unless they opened a door for it, because you cannot argue that someone retaining an attorney is consciousness of guilt. You have a right to counsel. It is a constitutional right. You have a right to remain silent. That can't be argued either. But if a prosecutor insinuates, well, we never even heard from the defendant, it's not only improper, but it's a mistrial. And if the court doesn't mistrial, it's a reversible error. But you cannot comment on those fundamental rights, because retaining an attorney doesn't indicate guilt. Remaining silent doesn't indicate guilt. It can't be considered in a court of law. In the court of public opinion, people see those things differently, but the jury can't. So the state can't argue it that way. But then Yannetti asked, as he was going through Jen McCabe's deleted calls, did Karen Read have any deleted calls? No. Jen McCabe's Google searches deleted. Did Karen Read have any deleted Google searches? And he was like, well, actually, yes, but I didn't put a lot of credence into them with the issue we had with the other Google searches just not writing. The witness didn't say they were user deleted, but that the DB wall file looked similar and that he couldn't be sure because things had been redacted by the Attorney General, because it was clear that there were attorney-client communications on Karen Read's phone. So any potential communications, and I think that would extend to searches relating to counsel, would have been redacted out by the AG. So he didn't put a lot of credibility into that. They weren't trying to say, oh, Karen Read's deleting messages, obviously it means this. But Yannetti was trying to point the difference between all the shady behavior others have engaged in, the butt dial fuckery of it all, and saying, but Karen Read wasn't doing that. She was calling John O'Keefe 53 times, because they're going to argue the behaviors in closing, of course. But will Lally try to get into that at the very end of his redirect? I don't know. But I also don't know if it helps. Does that statement help the prosecution? Does Googling a DUI attorney help the prosecution? We've seen some Google searches, right? Corey Richins, we're looking at you. Corey Richins Googling luxury prisons for rich people is a whole different vibe than Googling DUI attorneys. So it's a different situation. We'll see if Lally gets into it. And Lally might not have even caught it. Lally might not even go there, because I don't know, honestly, if it helps him. But there's a lot of stuff the prosecution's put in this case that I don't think helps him. This morning when I was on Mix 105 with the Carson and Kennedy show, one of the questions that was asked was, why did the prosecution put in this audio of Karen Read saying, I have a cracked taillight and John O'Keefe is pummeled. He was beaten up by the Alberts. We're all in on the same joke here. They put in that audio. It hasn't come back up. Will it come up in closing? I think it might. For all of you that asked, do you think Karen Read needs to testify? I think they need to play that audio again in closing, because I think her testifying opens her up to potential problems that don't exist at the moment. Right now, the problems are all focused on the investigation. If Karen Read testifies, the jury's attention is all going to be on her face, her demeanors, and it opens her up for them to be like, I don't believe her at all. Right now, the I don't believe them at all is all pointed at the Commonwealth's witnesses, and I don't think they want to shift the tide on that. As we got to the end of court, we are now going through the autopsy report with the medical examiner, talking about the fact that the head injuries to John O'Keefe would have been not immediately fatal, and that it is a combination with the head injuries and the hypothermia that caused death. talking about the bruising on John O'Keefe's hand. The medical examiner believes that could be from possible medical intervention because there was a prick in the center of that bruising. And so maybe an attempt to get IV fluids in through John O'Keefe's hand, which would not be unusual or uncommon. So also talking about the bruising to the eyes coming from the base of the skull fracture, the brain injuries, talking about not only the blunt force trauma to the back of the head with the radiating fractures, but also talking about the types and kinds of injuries to John O'Keefe's brain. They are going to resume that testimony tomorrow morning and show the autopsy photos to the jury. We will not see those autopsy photos. Those will not be shown on TV. In-court cameras have always been really respectful of that. I think it's absolutely appropriate. The jury needs that information. We have seen the scratches to the arm. I don't think we will see much more than that. And that, I think, will take us through tomorrow. Will we see the prosecution rest tomorrow? We might. The court has said it's going to be a full day in court on Friday. So will we start getting into the defense experts with the doctor who already flew in from California tomorrow? Fingers crossed. For deep dives into the stories that I covered here, you can find them on my YouTube channel at The Emily D. Baker and The Emily Show podcast. I stream every Tuesday and Thursday. The podcast goes live on Wednesdays. And if you want to stay in the loop with everything I'm doing, receive the fastest notifications out there, and get more Law Nerd community, join me at lawnerdapp.com, our free app for iOS and Android.